morning and welcome to the news report. It's a lovely Saturday morning, a little bit
cold and chilly
morning. So be sure to keep warm, and if you're watching us, lucky are you with a nice warm cup of tea or coffee.
Sure.
Yes, we're here in studio bringing you the news report, and I'm KAMOTA Mayondi.
And my name is SALIFYANJI. Good morning.
Good morning. And if you're watching us on your Top Star decoder, you're watching live TV on channel 112. Do keep watching live. If you're watching us on Facebook, which is through our Facebook live stream on Facebook, on live TV, good morning to you on Facebook. Getting into the stories that we are leading with this morning. COVID-19 hits National Assembly and 15 MPs test positive. Dad impregnates daughter, gets sentenced to 40 years.
And opposition foreign forces plot against PF, reveals Kampyongo. And in international news, passengers injured as a fire jet comes closer to Iranian plane. We now get into the details of the story.
So 15 members of parliament have tested positive for COVID-19 from the tests that were carried out at National Assembly. Minister of Health, Dr. Chitalu Chilufya, has announced. Dr. Chilufya announced that 15 members of parliament and 11 National Assembly staff tested positive and have been contacted and isolated. However, the identities of the MPs have not been revealed, and of the 15 MPs who have tested positive, none are said to be in critical positions. And on Wednesday last week, the Vice President Inonge Winner and the Speaker of the National Assembly, Dr. Patrick Matibini, led members of Parliament as well as staff of the National Assembly in a coronavirus testing exercise at the Parliament building. So we have new numbers being announced, and we'll just get into the actual statistics of where we are as a country with regard to COVID-19. So our last daily update was on the 24th of July, and the numbers were as follows. There are 154 new cases of COVID-19, and these had been recorded from 835 tests that were conducted in the last 24 hours. So currently we have a cumulative number of cases at 3,856, total recoveries of 1,941, while we have 33 COVID-19 deaths and 97 associated deaths. Currently there are 1,779 active cases. So we take a look at this particular clip.
This will not only enable us manage those who are positive, but it will also help us stem the possible spread to constituents, to families, and as they reintegrate with their constituents and family, they shall be healthy. None of them is critically ill as we speak, and we are managing them in various facilities. In the last 24 hours further, we have recorded 154 new cases of COVID-19 out of 835 tests done, and this brings our cumulative number of cases to 3,856. The new cases are characterized as follows: 114 from community screening in Lusaka, Kabwe, Kitwe, and Ndola. Breaking down the 114, 70 are from Lusaka, 29 Kabwe, 12 Kitwe, and $3. Then screening in our various health facilities, we picked up 2 in Chingola, 16 in Lusaka, and 9 in Kitwe. And then those who are picked through contact tracing in Lusaka were 11. And we did identify 2 healthcare workers in Kitwe and Ndola. On a sad note, we lost our patient who was on a ventilator in the COVID center at Levi Manawansa. He had a comorbidity with hypertension, and he succumbed in the early hours of today. We also had 1 community death, and therefore this brings the total number of deaths to 136. So far, 33 are attributable to COVID, and 97 are COVID-associated deaths. We have discharged 253 patients. Among us, the patients that we are nursing at various facilities and in homes, bringing the total number of discharges to 1,941. So 253 patients have been discharged in the last 24 hours. We continue to see very ill patients in our COVID facilities, and as we speak, we have 16 patients on oxygen at Levy, and 2 are critically ill, while the rest are stable. Countrymen and women, it is disheartening and worrying to note that members of the public have continued to patronize drinking sports and continue to disregard wearing of masks in public despite the escalated status of the outbreak.
So that's the Health Minister, Dr. Chitalo Chilufya, just updating the nation on where we are with regard to numbers. So at Levy, there are 16 patients on oxygen, with 2 in a very critical position. And COVID-19 has definitely hit us hard at the moment. We are seeing more deaths, and the numbers are just getting more and more. From every test batch that they do, we're definitely seeing a lot more positive results than when it just came. And it just took me back to on the 23rd, there was a press statement issued by the chief spokesperson. There was a special meeting held with the president, and in the particular press statement, it addressed the fact that we will not go into a lockdown situation.
Sure.
And people still are thinking, will we not? But that came from the highest office in that particular cabinet issued press statement. Do you feel we should lock down or not? Like, for me now, personally, I feel like we just need to find a way to navigate the new normal.
Exactly.
And in that particular press statement, it was expressed that, and like the minister just added, people have really relaxed, and this is not the time.
That's true.
It's not the time. Masks are not being worn, and we're not doing our part anymore. We're not.
Sure. And I do agree with you. You asked whether I feel, it would really be a good thing to go into lockdown or not. And I do agree with you to say we need to just find better ways of, dealing with, the pandemic. It's here. And people already know what they're meant to do. They already know what they're supposed to do. And unless there are those people that really just haven't, seen anyone that they look up to, actually take those precautions that they need to be taken, because other people emulate. They want to see what other people are doing, and that's the only time that they're going to follow through as well. Then I also noted something from the minister. He mentioned that one thing that's for sure is like Lusaka still remains a hotspot. We have cases from Kabwe, Kitwe, Chungola, and Ndola as well. So the Copper Belt and Lusaka still remain as hotspots as well. And I don't, just because we only have 2 main areas, like from provinces recording these cases, does not mean that others are actually immune, to COVID as well.
Right.
And I think the misconception is that, for people that are, out in the outskirts of town, they may not really get, this the COVID and the disease or the virus. But one thing's for sure is that people are still moving around, and you never know who you are in contact with. And maybe there have been some deaths that have been related, but only that tests were not done, and so they can't really verify to say this is a COVID-related case and whatnot. And also now coming down to the members of parliament being tested for COVID-19. I guess it's a good thing that our leaders took the steps to go ahead and get themselves tested as well, just to know where they were standing, because previously there were out of 156, only 6 had gone to get tested. But it's a good thing that the vice president with others led the way, paved the way, and ensured that everyone was, or most of them were tested, because it doesn't say how many of those were actually the members of parliament were tested as well. And also we get back to one thing that we spoke about last time, the identities of the people that have COVID, especially like the MPs. Do you think it's okay to actually reveal their identities, considering that the previous 2 deaths that we have, members of parliament that died, they had died from COVID, related, it was a COVID related case. So only after they died was it revealed to the public to say these people have, COVID-19. So I don't know what's your take on the issue to do with identities.
Well, when it comes to COVID-19 related deaths, Okay, first of all, let me backtrack a little bit. I feel there's stigma.
Yeah.
And I understand why it may be scary to say, okay, yes, outrightly so and so died of COVID-19. But it shouldn't be the case. I really feel this is a challenge that's happening worldwide. Some people are getting COVID and dying, unfortunately. But it shouldn't now be something to be ashamed of. It can happen to anybody,
true.
right?
Yeah.
And protecting identities is important because we have seen stigma, right, around, like, for example, if I know that you're coming from a home where someone is died of COVID, there's that element of stigma.
Yeah.
Agreed. Though in part I'm a little bit mixed because I feel certain people are revealed, certain people are not revealed. So is it because this person is a high standing official? Is this why the person then is not being announced to have COVID-19? But then again, it comes down to issues of medical and that type of thing. Medical issues are generally, it's confidential. When you go to the hospital and you test positive for anything, whether it's from malaria to HIV to tuberculosis, you don't expect now there should be an announcement to say, oh, Sally now has tested positive for this particular.
So we could leave it down to the individual to actually, be okay with revealing their own, status in this particular case.
Right.
If they have COVID, they could come out and say, oh, I have a COVID. And I do understand now from this point that to really keep the identities hidden is a doctor-patient confidentiality unless the individual decides to reveal, the nature of, whatever they're suffering from.
But now where it becomes problematic is if you have tested positive for COVID and you don't do the right thing in assisting in contact tracing, or even yourself starting to reach out to say, okay, between Monday and Thursday, how many people have I seen? Who would I have accidentally or unknowingly exposed to the virus by virtue of me having COVID-19? So with me, that's where I am. And getting back to the fact that we have seen positive cases of COVID-19 coming from the National Assembly, and we have members of parliament who have COVID-19. For me, it comes back down to the whole risk of leadership. Our leaders are important, and we need to make sure that, they need to make sure that they're protecting themselves as best as they can. Because when they are, say, for example, all together, there's a risk that we could, in worst case scenario, lose an entire level of leadership. That leaves the country in a bad position or a handicapped position, right? So we also need to make sure, and we need right measures put in place to make sure that, guys, even our leaders are out there, but they're being safe. And that's why there was backlash some time back when Honorable Lusambo was out giving money, and there were people with no masks, and that's why there was backlash when Dr. Chilufya was going to court and his supporters came and they was crowding. So it comes down to those type of behaviors that lead to escalating the level of risk for people who are in leadership positions and are necessary to the democratic processes and structures that we have in the country.
And also one thing that he went on to say about people that are patronizing drinking places. COVID is not only in the drinking places. COVID is at the mall. COVID is, in the salon. In the salon. COVID is at the in the cabinet. Corona or COVID is everywhere, on the buses, everywhere that we go, because they say COVID does not move. It's the people that move. So everywhere you go, you find people that could have COVID, and they keep on transmitting before without them actually knowing if they are. So I would like to see a situation where the ministers themselves adhere to the guidelines, SI 21, SI 22. They stop going around in public places and giving out what they need, if they feel they need to give out. If there's a way in which they could give that out through their councillors, and a way that, it will be channeled down to the people that, they work with in communities. Also, when it comes to like markets as well, is there a way, a channel that can be followed where people can receive these incentives that government or the ministers want to give to their people without them actually being out there
Or
and
with the
and
crowd.
drawing a large crowd to them. Yeah.
Right. But it seems like this is just something that's the challenge is even when I know someone who has been doing some social good, going into communities to donate masks, and they said that crowds just form, and now you're like, we're here to give, but we need you to not crowd. We need you to just wait or make it systematic to say 20 people at a time. So it's also, everyone has a responsibility. At the end of the day, you can only control your actions. It's difficult to go into a place and have a certain amount of control over everyone, and this is why it goes back
Would
to...
it safe to carry it out house to house, house by house?
It becomes
as opposed to the
impractical,
market?
maybe?
It could.
You go where the
we
masses are.
we have counselors in communities. So if they are able to identify people that can go round, you know, and say, okay, come back with the statistics of how many people, you know, live in this particular area. Okay, you will take this area, go and give out masks, and then tomorrow someone will go into another area just like that, and they keep on distributing them. Just finding better ways of doing it. Because like you said, crowds do form, and that's one thing
And they're giving something. People
exactly,
flock.
and that's one thing that we cannot really, you know, throw away and say no, you know, it can't happen. It will happen, and it does happen. So we need to just find better ways in which we're able to distribute anything in a more sane and orderly manner, if possible.
Civilized manner.
Exactly.
Like yes, we're giving stuff, but
Sure.
let's also not be too excited
Yeah.
to want to crowd. This is not the time for crowding for any reason.
And I've seen situations where, like, people are in a crowd and they're being given masks or anything, and then they're asked right there and then to start spreading out. But they've already been in contact with each other. So what is that, you know, difference going to do then? Because people need to have that embedded in the minds to say, this is the norm. This is what we need to do. You know?
And Sally, before we go into the next story, I just want to hear your thoughts on this. But it's a weekend. We know that now people, of course, need to get a permit to hold a wedding or a kitchen party. But there was a statement issued to say that currently the major causes of the quicker spread is that we're still meeting and congregating for whether it's church meetings or whether it's village banking or weddings or kitchen parties. How do you think we navigate this particular aspect of life going on in the new normal, but we are still going through these activities?
I think we could go back and reset to default. The first time when there was, when no gatherings were allowed, you know, to be carried on, I think there was some kind of control there until it got to a point where it was, okay, 50 can gather, 100 can gather, 150. I think the problem comes when it's up to like 150. 50 is okay. People should not be worried about who does not come to their wedding at this particular point, because their lives now need to be the priority and not, you know, having to be concerned about, oh, what will people think if I have a small wedding? Oh, it's not a fairy tale wedding that I was hoping to have. I think we should really get past that. We should get past the bougie and just be, practical and realistic about the things that we get to do. When it comes to other gatherings like funerals as well, you know, you'd find that a lot of people will be gathered. And funny enough, especially like in Zambia, you would find that, you know, funeral gatherings will attract people that are not even related, or they don't even know this person, but they'll come through because it's like a free meal that's being given there. It's okay to really just change or shift, you know, the way that we think or do things. It's not a loss when one person or the other person is not there. Look, if I can't be there physically, if I'm able to send something and say, well, I can't make it because of this and that, but this is my contribution towards, you know, whether it's a funeral or whether it's towards a wedding or a kitchen party or anything. And maybe the Chilangamulilo should be put on hold or just cancelled for now, because that one also is a very big issue.
Right. So,
and I also saw one thing before we go into the next story. There was a recent launch of a new product, yes, or product or app. And I saw a lot of artists really gathered, in one place, and there was no social distancing then as well. So apart from the ministers, I think someone mentioned something very valid to say, leadership is not through only, we should not really look at the people that are on top, the elected office and whatnot. But a musician is also a leader. A clergy is also a leader. So what are you doing in your communities as well? If now we can have celebrities as well go and get, tested, just to show people, lead the way or pave the way, maybe would make a difference or two as well. Right. Yeah.
So with regard to the point that you're saying about gathering of celebrities or musicians and that type of thing, a part of me also feels like we're very, very picky when it comes to COVID. I feel everyone seems to have their threshold. Some people, the line is, I can't do gym right now. I think there's a higher risk of me catching COVID-19. Sure. But in the same vein, you're like, salon is okay. So I feel like everybody has a sort of different threshold for what's dangerous.
Sure thing. So we're going to our next story, and this story is related, to the Home Affairs, Ministry. And the Home Affairs Minister Mr. Stephen Kampyongo says government has unearthed a scam in which a named opposition political party with support from foreign agents is recruiting and enticing police officers as well as defense forces to resign and be drilled to destabilize the country. Kampyongo says the plot is aimed at discrediting the PF administration. He says a number of police officers have been approached to join the rebel group agenda, but that some of them have turned down the offer. Kampyongo has since warned that government will not allow any foreign agent to disturb the peace the country has enjoyed for a long time. We take a look at this clip.
There is no police officer who will be treated with kid gloves if he or she decides to quit his or her career without following the laid down procedures. A police officer is a disciplined professional who follows law of orders in all his career undertakings. And this therefore makes him or her distinctive from other professions. It is therefore important that the men and women in uniform should strictly adhere to the stipulated procedures and endeavor to serve the government of the day with pride. I also wish to bring this to attention and the attention of the general public that government is fully aware of the scheme of a non-opposition political party under the sponsorship of some foreign agents who are targeting our police officers to resign and then drill them to act in a manner that would discredit the service and the government. The hatched plan is anticipated to include also officers from the defense and other security wings.
That was the Honorable Minister and the Ministry of Home Affairs, Mr. Stephen Kampyongo. I don't really have much to say pertaining to this particular story. Sometimes you need the right information to actually, go all out and, give a comment. The political party has not been named in this regard. He just said a well-known political party, so we don't really know which political party this one is. And I know probably this story is related to, the story of the policeman that decided to, abscond from work for some time, and then he said he had, resigned, from the public service as well. So yeah, I don't know if you have any contribution.
I think this is a very big allegation, and something of this magnitude would need you need to build a very strong case to come out and say this is definitely the proof of what it is that we're saying. And if indeed this is true, it's sad that foreign agents are being used to destabilize with an aim to destabilize peace in the country, and no one should have that much undue influence over proceedings in another country.
Exactly.
That is absolutely
But do you think
unacceptable.
they're coming here of their own regard, or someone has approached them and say, we need your help in trying to
Well-
do this? That's if the allegations are actually true.
well-
Because I doubt if someone would come from their own country and just be like, let's remove these people from the service and ensure that they're following this political party. So
Well,
it really doesn't have enough meat on it at this particular point.
With regard to foreign agents and that type of thing, I will give an example of stories that happened in the US with regard to Trump winning the election and alleged Russian interference in that process. It's not acceptable. It seems like it does happen.
It seems like it does
foreign
happen.
policy is
Yeah.
beyond diplomats having cordial relations. Sometimes there's need to have an undue advantage, or you'll find that a certain country supports of course they do it diplomatically, but you find that if the opposition of a particular country have needs that align to another foreign country who would benefit in the event that that particular party was in power, I wouldn't put it past anything, because the world is the world. Like, people go into dubious means to get what they want at any means necessary, unfortunately. But for me, it's really important that people who work for the Republic of Zambia realize that they're non-partisan. You know, civil servants are non-partisan. No police
And they're not allowed to vote.
Right.
So,
No,
yeah.
you can have allegiance to a particular party, but you don't represent any one party.
Exactly, yeah.
Police officers do not represent the PF or the UPND or
They serve the public.
They serve the Zambian, they serve
Exactly,
Sali, they
yeah.
serve Murita, they serve whoever. They do not serve a party. And I think it's very important that this is clear.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, that's true. So we'll go on a break and we'll come back with more stories after this. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to News Report. My name is KAMOTA MAYONDI.
And I'm SALIFYANJI BWEUPE.
And getting back into our stories, a Sinazongwe resident has been sentenced to 40 years imprisonment with hard labor for having sex with his biological daughter and impregnating her. The man convicted of incest and sentenced by the Livingston High Court. Facts before the case are that between 1st January 2018 and May 30th, the man did have several occasions have sex with his biological daughter. He virtually impregnated his daughter and demanded her to administer an illegal abortion. He was later arrested in Sinazongwe for incest and was tried in the magistrate's court in Sinazongwe district. At the close of the trial, the man was found guilty of incest, was committed to the Livingston High Court for sentencing. When he appeared before the High Court Judge Justice Kenneth Mulife, he was handed a 40-year jail sentence with hard labor for the offense with effect from May 30th, 2018 date of arrest. And this particular story was carried by the Lusaka Sun newspaper. And it's a very sad development to have. It's a very twisted story because incest is illegal in Zambia, and for me it would have been interesting to have more detail with regard to the age of the daughter. But whatever the case is, that is a very, very sad and disturbing story, because if you're, say, in the home, a parent is someone who's expected to protect you and that type of thing, but then here you have a man taking advantage of his daughter and even insisting that she has an abortion, an illegal abortion. For me, in as much as this is a sad story, I like that it's gone to court and this man will face a sentence. Because most times in homes, when stories like this happen, there's a lot of shame associated to it, and you have people insisting that no, this can't come out of the home, we can't take this to court, or this is your father, what will people think? So for me, when we see more cases like this actually going all the way to court and people being punished for their horrendous crimes, it's important that this becomes the norm, that people actually get held accountable for their wrong.
That's true.
Right.
When I saw the story, it actually broke my heart to know that, or to note that, a biological father would actually, sleep with his own, daughter. And you can imagine how twisted this, man's mind should be to actually put himself in that position where he has to have sex with his daughter, you know what I mean? So I do really feel it's sad, and you've said there are a lot of several cases, I'm sure, that, and withdrawn cases obviously, that are related to this particular story that we've just read. And obviously we do not know how old this man is. We do not know how old the daughter is as well, because obviously she was of age. And him getting to a point where he says she had to go and have an abortion as well. And I'm just really looking at how the daughter must have been affected by all this. She probably had to keep quiet for like a long time. She couldn't say anything to anyone for fear of being stigmatized or judged. And maybe it was at this particular point where exactly, yeah, and I'm sure it was at this at the point where she was asked to do an abortion or went for an abortion, that probably someone spoke to her and she opened up and said, this is what's happening, and the person responsible is my father as well. It's such a shame to have, someone that you're supposed to be looking up to, protecting you, level himself down to this, because I do think it's less of human, in this case, to actually have to do this, so yeah, that's my contribution to this particular story. Yeah.
Right.
So we will go into our next story, and this is a related court case where a Kalinga man accused of assaulting Justice Minister Given Luwinda fell sick at the court premises, prompting the court to adjourn his judgment to a later date. In this case, Martin Mambo, 38, a driver, is charged with assault. The allegation is that on July 12th of last year, that is 2019, Mambo allegedly assaulted Luenda and occasioned him actual bodily harm. The accused was found with the case to answer and was consequently placed on his defense, where he denied that he did not assault the minister. He claimed that the time Luenda was assaulted, he was recovering from tuberculosis treatment. When the case came up for judgment before Chief Resident Magistrate Lamek Mwale, Public Prosecutor Juvenalis Kamotondale said the accused was not before court, but his surety was available. Priscilla Zemba told the court that the accused was earlier at the court premises but fell sick. Zemba, 30, of Makeni East, said the accused developed stomach pains and was taken to the hospital for treatment. He suddenly got ill. He had been rushed to the hospital. He complained of stomach pains and developed a running stomach, she told Magistrate Mwale. Magistrate Mwale, however, told Zemba to ensure that accused texts documentation to prove that he was sick at the next sitting. The court had since adjourned the case to August 4th for judgment. I remember this particular story trending, last year, and if I'm correct, it was the time that some people were upset over some piece of land being given to ShopRite, to build a store in that location, and that should have been KAMOTA as well. And it was during that time that Given Luenda, the minister, Given Luenda, came out and said no, he had been assaulted by one or some people at the time that he was there as well. And now he said he was recovering, from a TB, from tuberculosis or treatment, and there's no telling whether it's true or not. So only the judge will be able to determine whether she or he is satisfied with is satisfied with the evidence that is put before him, as to whether he was undergoing treatment or not in this particular case as well. Do you feel this case should really move on as from the time that it started, considering what it's where it's at right now? And obviously this poor man that was the accused falling sick as well, and maybe he was nervous, maybe he was genuinely feeling unwell.
Well, I feel that it could be nerves. It definitely could be nerves, or strategy to buy time. If someone causes anybody bodily harm, whether they are a public official, whether they are a citizen, if you go and to that extent of causing bodily harm, I think ride it out. Let the case go through the court. Let judgment be made. If people need to be punished, they will be punished. We have become very violent with impunity as a nation. With impunity, like, you have no right to. Yes, you are angry, but there's ways to channel or to create dialogue. So laying hands on whether it's ministers, whether it's cadres, whether it's civilians, drivers, I am impartial. Everybody is equal. If you're causing bodily harm to anybody for whatever reason, we should see you in court.
But is it fair to only, bring down or slap this, assault case on one person? I don't think could have been this one person that
absolutely
caused any bodily harm to the minister. So I think there could have been others that were involved, and I wish that everyone that was responsible or around at that particular time should have just been brought to book also.
Well, it could be the one person. We could get into a bit of a fracas between you and I, and like say if it's in the studio and I'm the one who now gives you that blow, that sends you to the ground. You would remember me to be like, no, the person who. So
even if there were others, you only remember that one person.
The person, if I saw you or if it's obvious that this is the person. So it might be a case of that, and which goes back down to situations of mob justice and stuff like that. It can be something that's done in a group, but if you then are the one person who maybe you don't know that, this person has been hit so much, and then you give that blow that now causes the person to die. And people are like, it's difficult. And this is why we should refrain from these type of behaviors. It's a tricky position to be in. Of course, Martin Mambo was not the one person who was there, obviously. But it's come down to this.
Yeah, and issues to do with mob justice as well. What I find funny about it, not funny as in laughing kind of way, but what I find really weird or funny about it is that even if you do not know, like there are certain types of people that even if they do not know what the situation is, they'll just come in and start hitting. And I remember watching, one of these boxing movies and whatnot, and I'm wondering, how is it that you can get up from home and start punching someone that you do not you don't know?
Or even if you know, even if you
know them, but why are you actually causing any bodily harm to them?
But I feel that generally as a country we are bubbling under. Like a lot of people are angry. Like people are ready to
so it's easily triggered
to just spark, and before you know it, mob justice. Before you know it, an entire member of parliament is getting roughed up, or a minister. So there's definitely a lot of tension in the country.
True. Yeah. Okay, so now into public service. When it comes to information and broadcasting services, the permanent minister had something to say.
Right. So the permanent secretary, Mr. Amos Malupenga, has advised the media against abusing confidence and trust of the public to advance their personal agendas. So Mr. Malupenga says the media must be professional and employ ethical judgment. He says public trust is fundamental to the success of media development. He also went on to caution the media to use professionalism to avoid having fake news as well as wrong information on social media. He says fake news undermines trust, destabilizes democracy, and must be stopped. Mr. Malupenga was speaking in Lusaka during the launch of the MISA Zambia Trust in the Media Baseline Report for 2019-2020. And Mr. Malupenga urged the mainstream media to read the report and ensure it serves as a reminder for ethics and professionalism to remain key guidelines for the execution of their duty. Meanwhile, MISA Zambia board person Martin Akende says the COVID-19 pandemic provides the media a more vital role in ensuring that the public have correct and accurate information. And so looking at this story, absolutely fake news, wrong information, absolutely problematic. Very, very. And fake news spreads so quickly. You find a story is posted on, and social media is the key culprit for fake news. It's easier than fabricating an entire video story, I suppose. So you find social media, it goes, and before you know it, 30 minutes, this particular story has gone viral. Everyone is assuming that it's the truth. So absolutely agree with Mr. Malupenga. It's important that the media exercise extreme levels of professionalism and are able to be held as credible sources of information.
Yeah, and just takes me back, some years back, when it comes to anything to do with like sources of news and information, you'd have, a station, a particular TV station, a radio station, avail a number that people from the communities can actually call. I think then it was better because most of the news that was coming out of the communities were actually factual and could be proven as well, as opposed to now and the world we're living in where everything is fabricated on social media, so you do not know whether it's true or not. And I guess as media personnel and media houses, one thing that we need to take in consideration is we need to verify facts as well before we actually come up in the open and say, okay, this is what's actually happened. And I do agree with the permanent secretary as well, that people need to really still remain, confident in media houses. They still need to maintain and be faithful, to media houses as well, or switch on their TV, flip through the station, listen to the news that is genuine and proven as well. It will take some time to actually distinct or separate the social media that's the fake news to the actual news, because now the world is it's changing, it's revolving. But for it to actually be at a point where people are able to understand what is real and what is fake, it has to be more personal, and so we still need to keep on preaching and telling the people to say, hey, it's important to verify facts before you actually take this information as true or not.
I say this a lot. I know it's important that the media, as the generators of content, are extremely professional and ethical. But sometimes, I always say, sometimes we can be so gullible. Sometimes there's a story, and even when you read the story, I'm like, guys, this story doesn't quite check out. And with regard to the actual media fraternity and stuff like that, because of the way that times have changed, I think also the way that people like us who work in this particular industry need to up our skills and that type of thing. Fact checking has to happen more quickly these days, because there's always that thing, do you want to break the story first, or do you want to have the right story with the right facts? So it's also that sometimes we're just too quick to say, hey, this has happened. Before you know it, people have said, hey, that person has died. And then time passes and they're like, no, the person is just ill in hospital. So the whole sensationalism, the whole wanting to break the story fastest, the juiciest, is also very problematic. So that needs to change.
Yeah, and I think at that particular point also, when you want, even if you want to be the first one to break that story, it's very important to have a niche, to have your own way of disseminating that information. We are different from other, broadcasting houses, and every other broadcasting house is different. Yes, it's different from the other person as well. And so it's okay to actually maintain who you are, be real, because everything that is real will attract. It will be said. You won't even have to explain yourself. People will just look at it and say, okay, exactly, this is the story. Where you look at a newspaper and the headline is completely different, and the story is like, how do these, marry?
And the story is not juicy at all.
Exactly. But that is a way for, newspapers to actually attract, people to buy the newspapers. That's how they make their sales. So it's very different when it comes to print media and actually, televised, information as well.
Speaking of selling, I won't mention this particular paper, but at the time there was a very popular newspaper that every weekend edition there would be a very provocative picture, just to make sure people want to read it and that type of thing. So different media houses have different styles, but it's important to put professionalism above wanting to be sensational.
Exactly.
And if you do a good job, your news will sell. If you present your news in a great way, or your content in a great way, there's absolutely no reason to now start having these exaggerated headlines.
Exactly. And if I can bring it down to a person, one thing I do not like is having to explain myself. So everything I do has to be something that is visible. Someone will not come back to me and ask me, why did you do that? Because it already have made sense. So if we are doing something, it should be obvious, yes, obvious, realistic, something that is relatable as well, because people want to relate, And that's the whole idea behind, having a different way in which, bring out or present, your news to the people out there. It doesn't matter how big you are, but what matters is how, you dress yourself up, how you present yourself, and everything else will follow suit. It's not about how many, people or how many areas you're going to be able to cover at the end of the day. I think before that, there has to be, how genuine or how relevant is this, particular package that we have and we're sending out to the general public out there. Yeah.
Well, different strokes for different folks. Yeah.
Exactly. So now we go into our international news, and several passengers on an Iranian airline have been injured over Syria after the pilot changed altitude to avoid collision with a U.S. fighter jet. According to Iranian media, but the United States military said its F-15 kept a safe distance. The airline Mahan Air is on a U.S. sanctions list for supporting Iranian's Revolutionary Guard and Hezbollah fighters in Lebanon. Al Jazeera's Zaina Kador reports from Beirut.
A state of panic among passengers on board Flight 1152. The Airbus was flying from Iran's capital Tehran to Beirut in Lebanon on Thursday night, when the Iranians say it was harassed by fighter jets. Data recorded showed the airliner climbed from 34,000 feet to 34,600 feet in less than 2 minutes, before descending to 34,000 feet a minute later. Iran state TV says several passengers were injured due to the sudden changes in altitude. The jet landed safely in the Lebanese capital.
When
we reached the airspace of Syria, a fighter jet approached a Mahan plane. In order to avoid colliding with that jet, the pilot rapidly decreased altitude and it caused injury for some passengers.
Hours later, the U.S. Central Command confirmed a U.S. F-15 was involved in the incident and not Israeli warplanes as first suspected. The U.S. said the F-15 was on a routine air mission near the Tanaf coalition base in Syria. The warplane conducted a standard visual inspection of the airliner at a safe distance, says the U.S., and once identified, the F-15 opened distance from the aircraft in line with international standards. Privately owned Mahan Air has been under U.S. sanctions for years, accused by Washington of providing financial, material, and technological support to Iran's Quds force, which includes the Lebanese group Hezbollah.
There's accusations that aircraft from that airline are used to ferry logistic support for Iranian-backed forces in the region. So that may well have been one of the reasons why the US decided to take a closer look at the aircraft.
U.S. troops are in the El Tanaf area near Syria's borders with Iraq and Jordan. The base was first established to fight ISIL in 2016. It has since become an outpost to counter Iran's expansion in the region, as it's on a supply route linking Tehran to Beirut that passes through Syria.
The message is that this corridor is basically a no-go zone for the Iranians, whether a civilian airplane or whether any other presence in that region.
The incident could have been an unfortunate encounter, but many believe it was a message. The fact that it came at a time of heightened tensions between Iran and the United States in the region caused concern. There have been numerous occasions that risked an all-out conflict. So far, Tehran and Washington have avoided all-out confrontation. This latest incident in the skies, a reminder that the potential for an escalation is real. Sana Khudr, Al Jazeera, Beirut.
So that's a report coming out of Beirut, and as you can see there, several people, passengers were actually injured. Now, apart from that, I'm just thinking how traumatized they must have
been so scary.
And maybe, with the pilot as well, it was like an instinct. He was scared and trying to save the people, people's lives, So it's kind of like, in between, So he says he was trying to avoid collision, whilst the U.S. also has your own, version of the story as well. But the fact that though injured, they're okay. I think for me, I feel that's okay. But as regards to, whether, It's just confusing when U.S. also always wants to point a finger on other people, especially now when it comes to like Iran, and we know there's a bit of tension that has gone on for years on and whatnot. But I'm glad the passengers came out
Ultimately,
okay.
it's good that lives were preserved.
Exactly.
In that must have been a very scary and tricky situation.
Yeah.
And on that note, we get back to the stories that we led with today. So COVID-19 hits National Assembly as 15 MPs test positive. Dad impregnates daughter and gets sentenced to 40 years.
And opposition foreign forces plot against PF reviews Kampyongo, and passengers injured as U.S. fighter jet comes close to Iranian plane. That's all we had for you on this episode of News Report. Join us again on Monday at 19 hours. This has been SALIFYANJI
And KAMOTA MAYONDI
saying have a lovely day and God bless.